All right. Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to another future-focused weekly update. I'm your host, Christopher Lind, and if I am doing my job well, I am keeping you 10 steps ahead of what's happening at the intersection of business, tech, and the human experience. I'm looking forward to this one like I always am. Before we get started, thank you to all of you who watch, listen to this. I really appreciate the support and the things you send along, and just even the encouraging messages and some of the critical feedback I get. I appreciate that just as much. So keep that coming, and I will continue including that. Couple quick technical updates, or not technical, scheduling updates to let you know. I plan on not releasing another episode next week with the 4th and the holidays. I don't know that I'll have time to make something anyway. And then I'll be back after that. So just so you know, if you don't see something next week, that's why. This week, I actually am doing a different format. If you have not been listening for a while or you're new to the show, in January of this year, I started something new where at the beginning of the year, I put together my top 10 things and predictions, realistic predictions for where things were going to go in 2025. And here I said, you know what, maybe I'll check in each quarter on it. Well, it's been more than a quarter. We're right at the halfway mark for the year. I can't believe that. And I thought, you know what? I actually want to go back and revisit that because as I looked at the list, I went, I actually have some updates on where I think things are at with that, what things I think are coming into fruition, what things have adjusted. So I actually want to run through that list, but then there's some things that I want to add that I didn't have on the list that I think are pressing things that should be on everybody's radar. And then there are some that I would say they're things to watch that are starting to show up. I think we've got a little bit of time before we need to be really, really deeply considering them, but this could change. And then I'll check in at the end of the year and we'll see how it closes out. So I promised that. And I did get a bunch of messages from people at the beginning of the year when I said I was doing this. And that was actually one of my most popular episodes so far this year. So why not check back in on it? So the structure of today's episode is I'm going to give an update on the 10 things, a brief update, and kind of tell you where my head's at based on what I'm seeing on those 10. Second section, I'm going to go through what I would add that I did not have on that list that I think should be on your priority list, or at least very much aware because I think they're hot issues. And then the other ones are, these are things you're probably going to hear me talking about them. I wouldn't be stressing or, worrying too much about that at this point. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so the first one, getting into it, the first one I had on the list for 2025 was the emotional nature of AI becomes a bit of a double-edged sword. So the fact that AI is getting better and better at sounding, thinking, behaving like a human being has both pros and cons. I actually would absolutely keep this one at the top of the pile in terms of a prediction and something that we need to be aware of. And I would say, if anything, it's only increased in priority. And you're going to see how it connects to some of the other updates. But realistically, this is really becoming a double-edged sword. And with where some of the things are going right now, I would actually say this one's cutting more in the negative trend than it is in the positive trend. Even some of the things that on the surface have seemed positive in 2025, like I don't know if you used ChatGPT when it went through that really overly supportive, overly excited stage. It's still pretty encouraging, but not for the little window that it did there. But it's really gotten to a point where people are starting to lean on it and trust it and just become a little bit too comfortable with AI because of it, which is especially concerning given some of the data related to its safety and what it's doing. In terms of how I think this is going to progress, I think if anything, and why we need to watch this, is the way AI feels human. Only as I've watched it this year has it further refined how it works. So the emotional nature of AI, its ability to feel like you're talking to a friend, has only gotten a lot better in the past 6 months. And so that I actually think is going to make it more of a risk to us, because when something feels human, when something feels trustworthy, you're more inclined to trust it, even if your better judgment would say, yeah, but the data says not to. My own previous experience says not to. It becomes a much more comfortable area to fall victim to that. And so I I would actually say this double-edged sword is getting sharper and sharper and sharper, which means our discernment, our intentionality needs to go up even higher as we become more comfortable working with this, because we're also moving through the adoption curve. As I look at usage and even just the comfort level culturally, we're becoming much more just comfortable using it. And as a result, I think, what did I see? I think the other day I saw some data. Like basically in the 90 some percentile of people are using generative AI tools on a daily or weekly basis. So we've massively moved the needle in terms of adoption, which makes its relatability and its almost human-like capabilities just that much easier for us to fall prey to. And I'm not going to sit and go through all the different things it can do, because then we'd have a whole update just on this one. But this one, to me, very much was a realistic prediction at the beginning of the year. I think, if anything, it accelerated in adoption and its fine-tuning how emotional or seemingly emotional AI can be. It still is not emotional. It still does not have context. It still does not understand. If you listened last week, I talked about the nature of this in counseling therapy apps and why this is so dangerous. So if you didn't see that, go check that out last week. But that's where I stand on that one. So let's move on to number two. Number two is, I said deepfakes are going to reach crisis levels. Now, that was a little bit of hyperbole at the beginning of the year, because I was looking out at how the percentage of, the predictions of how much media that's being created is being created, just it's purely AI generated. There's not even necessarily, there might be a human in the loop in terms of asking it to be created, but other than just publishing it, that's really about the extent of it, which means deepfake content. At the beginning of the year, there was tons of stuff with the election season just kind of wrapping up. There was tons of stuff with deepfake images all over. Crisis level of, have I seen any major things happen that have made people go, oh my gosh, like an entire nation swung based on a completely fake event? Fortunately, no. So when I think of crisis level, do I think we've reached that? If anything, in some ways, I think we've become more skeptical in a healthy way of what we're seeing. And now here's the downside to that. And this was a natural downside that I'm seeing. I'm curious to see how the year finishes out. As we've adapted to the reality, and something that also has really strongly affected this big time is video. AI video generation has exploded. We're still in the early adoption phase. So where I would keep this really at the top of the list as we watch for this is, we're just now getting to the point where the general public can do text to video and have really high quality video produced. So I'm already starting to see, I'm not on this, but I have people share stuff with me and people I know do it. But, viral AI generated, I watched one the other day my kids thought was so funny, of like cats dancing to stuff. And it's just AI. Now, granted, we're in the meme stage, but we're going to quickly get to a point, because they're still looking relatively fake, where AI video is going to become as commonplace as AI images. And now I will say there's tons of deepfake content that I see now where there's an image, not necessarily nefariously used, trying to misrepresent something, but to drive home the emotional component to it. So there might be a post about, I don't know, some storm that's happened. And now it's just commonplace that there's going to be a picture of something that's not even a real picture. Now you're starting to see that expand even further, where somebody's just making a social media post, but they want it to have some emotional gravitas. So they create a realistic, like you wouldn't know it was even a fake picture, that drives their message home, which then, blows up virality and things like that. So it's moving in a direction that's a little bit interesting, and that I think people's awareness is a little higher. So I'm seeing much more of the deepfake stuff being more to drive home the point of the text, to really drive the emotional impact. I'm not seeing as much, can you believe this? Like, and then you find out the picture is completely fake. here's a picture of this thing that happened, and then it blows up all over only to find out, no, it didn't happen. So I think that's a good thing. I think people are a little more skeptical. They see a picture of something, they'll maybe do a quick Google search and be like, is this even real? Type of a thing, which is good. I don't think we're quite there in terms of video yet. I will probably do it. Well, not I will. I'll do an update at the end of the year. I'm really watching what happens with video and how video takes off. Video still, you can still pretty much tell if it's an AI generated video. So I don't think it's quite at the level where if somebody's doing a fake body cam video that blows up only to find out it's not real. We're not there yet, but we very much could be. Now, here's the downside, though, to this really taking off the way it did, is people seem much more disengaged online. And I've actually noticed that even in some of the metrics and stats around social media engagement. I do a lot of work with LinkedIn and some of these other big players. And there's definitely a cultural shift as people are a little more hesitant about what they read. They're a little less engaged because they just are like, I don't even know what's real anymore. Now, some of this has to do with just some of the burnout and stuff going on, the uncertainty, with everything else. But I also think the downside to people being more conscious and concerned about things being fake on the internet, things you read, things you see, things you watch, is they're a little more like, you know what, I'm just going to step back a little bit. And maybe that's a good thing. So that's where I'm at with that one. We'll see how that one plays out as we continue through the year. Now, 3. Okay, I'm gonna talk about this from 2 levels. The way I had framed it at the beginning of the year, and I'll talk about what I'd add in section 2. But where the update I wanted to give is in the beginning of the year, and number 3 was AI dependency is fueling mental health epidemic. So this one is specifically on an individual personal level. So people's addiction, their hook on Gen AI is going to fuel mental health problems. We are already seeing data, countless data starting to come in that this is becoming a real problem for things. So this, I would say, is probably more of a concern that I'm keeping an eye on than it even was in January. I was predicting it was going to be a major area of opportunity. I would say it's worse than I thought. And that's largely due to not only, one, how many more people have adopted Gen AI who are not fully, I would say, prepared for what they're signing up for, but as the AI companies have locked in and honed in on perfecting the way Gen AI engages with you. It felt very AI. Then it got a little too like, whoa, creepy factor. You're a little too encouraging, a little too in my face. Then they dialed it back and they're really zoning in on that. It feels like that trusted partner. It feels like, the person you can go to. And we're seeing this pop up. I've covered it in multiple updates. People are turning to Gen AI for therapy. They're turning to it for relationship advice. They're turning to it for friendship. They're turning to it for lots of things. Now, that's not to say all bad and there's no good that can come from any of that. But what's concerning is it's being done without a lot of discernment or understanding of the risks, or when you're not paying attention, it's just really easy to become dependent. And that is starting to fuel. I don't think we're at the epidemic stage of mental health, because I think right now we're moving into this, we don't realize we're becoming dependent on it. And so I would say we're maybe a little early, at least that's my best pulse on where we are from a dependency standpoint. I think we're just becoming dependent on it now. I think at the mid-year track of 2025, there's more and more people who are in that early dependency stage. They're not feeling the full weight of this. So I say this in some ways as a warning to everybody right now, because I know even the people who complain about AI, I can't tell you how many conversations I have with people who they complain about AI. And then when I dig in, they're using it just as much. But everybody always thinks, well, the way I'm using it is the good way. Everybody else is, I hate I'm seeing this. I hate I'm seeing that. That's the wrong way to use it. The way I'm using it, totally fine, totally safe. There's nothing I would change about that. And that seems to be the general consensus. And so we have made major adoption, a big lack of self-awareness, And then the tech is fine tuning. And so we have all the ingredients for dependency to really start to take root. And so I think for anybody watching, this is something, now is a really good time to do inventory on how am I using AI? Where am I at? I talk regularly about some of the fasts that I take, the AI fasts I take, where I pull back from it and go, I'm going to like not even touch AI on, how I was using it over here and things like that. Just again, to make sure that I'm testing those dependency buttons, to make sure I'm not becoming over dependent on it for my own mental well-being, so that if there's an outage, we're not going, oh, I don't have anybody to talk to because AI's out, because we've had a couple major outages already this year. So from a purely mental health standpoint, I would say now we are in one of those very vulnerable stages where we are becoming dependent. We don't realize we're becoming dependent. And so we're not feeling the consequences. And because we aren't good at looking past the end of our nose, this makes us very vulnerable right now. So if you're listening, watching this, I would say now is a very good time to take check on that. And then I want to check back in at the end of the year, and I'll give a bit of an update on whether we're seeing this. But the data is coming back that the risks of dependency on our mental health are huge. So we're at a very important inflection point. All right. Number 4 that I had was broader AI adoption paired with the exponential AI capability growth. Now, this has been interesting. What I'm surprised and not surprised by is the adoption piece is looking very different than I don't know how best to frame this, because in some ways I guess my optimism was hoping it would have gone different. My expectations we're kind of right about where I thought we would be. I just really had hoped with some of the direction of where things were going, we'd be in a better spot. Not to say it's all bad, but let me give an update on the adoption piece and then the capability growth. So adoption-wise, what's interesting is going back to the adoption, massive amounts of people, pretty much everybody's using Gen AI. Many, many, many companies have turned on Gen AI capability through one of their workplace productivity tools. So if they have not already, they're in the process of flipping on, Gen AI, Copilot, Gemini, things like that. They've loosened their policies in the organization. At the beginning of the year, there was a lot of just straight up lockdown. We're not letting people use it, which people were just working around it. So I would say it's becoming more generally accepted. We're seeing what's not on here, but I think related to the adoption, we saw the insurgence of AI first companies that were saying, we're not just allowing it, we're all in on this type of a thing. But what we're not seeing in terms of adoption is that stronger strategic, right? But how is that happening? And this is where, when I talk to executive teams or when I'm brought in, just so you know, like, this is where I spend a lot of my time. Is I get brought in because a lot of people are kicking the tires. They know now, well, people have this, but we don't really have any direction on what they should be doing, or we're not really clear on how this all works, other than we just know people have it and are doing stuff with it. The kind of adoption that we're missing is, here are specific initiatives and here is how AI is enhancing that. These are the specific ways we're integrating AI into this part of our work to make it better. Here's where we're augmenting with AI so that we have more time to do this. That kind of strategic work, we're still in the early stages, which I guess is, I'd hoped we'd made a little more progress. I am surprised at how many senior execs I engage with where, they're working on their AI strategy. And when I talk with, okay, where are you at? There's been a lot of meetings about AI, not a lot of rubber meets the road type of a thing. So if that resonates with you, if that's where you are, you're not alone. That's where I think most people are. If you need help with that, let me know, because I think a lot of people are discovering now, we actually need some help figuring this out, because what we're discovering is AI could really be used on just basically anything. And so now we're just feeling overwhelmed, which is leading a lot of companies to just be like, we turned on Copilot and Gemini, so we're good. And they're realizing Not really. If anything, they've added the expense of these AI tools, the risk of these AI tools, without any real clear guidance on what are we getting out of this? What are people doing with this? How is this enhancing things? That's a major problem. Now, the second half of this update was the AI capability growth. I told you at the beginning of the year, I was interested to see if we would see kind of this continued meteoric rise of its capability, or if it would start to flatten out. Now, depending on which headlines you're reading, you could argue for both sides. I think one of the most interesting things that's come out is the Apple research that shows, despite all the hype about advanced reasoning models, some of the latest frontier models, all these new capabilities, we've seen deep research just explode. We've seen new applications of this stuff. What is very apparent is there is an AI confidence cliff, where at some point it hits a level of complexity that it's doing things. It falls off the map and it's wrong basically 100% of the time, but it's still extremely confident. So people aren't picking up on it. And I think this is one of the, I actually think this is going to be one of the big level playing fields, which, going back to adoption, I think for business leaders who are listening to this is a good opportunity to go, hey, now's a good time to call Christopher and have him come help us figure out where do we focus, because we might actually have some breathing room with the capability growth of AI. Because I agree with some of the things that are saying, in order for us to break through some of these ceilings that we're seeing with AI, we're going to have to re-engineer how the AI works, because just the typical language model architecture is not going to give us the kind of advanced capabilities we thought it would. Now, I know Sam Altman and some of these other folks who are like, we've achieved AGI. They would argue and disagree with me. I think they're grossly over-exaggerating what it's capable of. I mean, it's capable of sounding really confident. It's capable of sounding like it's the smartest person in the world by a long shot. But then if you actually pressure test what it's saying, it's wrong. So you're like, well, that's not AGI. You're not ASI. You're not artificial super intelligence if you're wrong 100% of the time, just because you sound really good. And I think that's some of the big disconnects. So the capability growth, in my opinion, I guess I'll check back in at the end of the year and see where we go, is we've hit a little bit of a ceiling in terms of what it's capable of. Despite all the announcements, we've seen slowdowns in some of the releases of frontier models. Things seem to be calming down a little bit. We seem to be going in the diversification of the applications and less of this. I mean, there is the, PhD level agents that you can get and things like that. But I think what people are discovering is they just are not delivering the value we thought. So we'll see what happens as we finish out the year. All right, number 5, this is a big one. I talked about automation unemployment becomes tangible. Wow, if I had, this is one I would update big time, in that it's not just tangible. Realistically, the number of people I've talked to and the number of articles I've read and the number of board meetings I've been in where companies are making layoff decisions purely based on AI is a little bit terrifying, to be completely honest with you. It's very concerning how many leaders and business decision makers are leaning towards letting people go. Honestly, the scary part is on the belief that AI can replace them. We're even at a stage where there's tangible data showing, hey, we don't need this role or we don't need this many people. It's based on a promise. Now, I will tell you, I was going to cover it this week before I decided to do this, so I'll probably cover it next week. The companies that did this early, that were maybe doing this in January, beginning of the year, end of last year, were laying people off with AI. They're already coming out going, this was a mistake. Those headlines are not getting much attention. And so we still are very much on this bandwagon of companies writing checks based on what they think AI is going to be able to do for them, letting people go before they really have the data to know, is this going to work? And I predict, before the end of the year, we're going to see a lot more job loss. We've already seen a ton in 2025, and it crushes me because we're seeing a ton of job loss. We're also seeing people who are out of work struggle to find new work because companies aren't hiring. One of the talking points of a company going AI first, it's apparently part of a universal playbook somebody wrote somewhere, is we don't hire anybody until we've validated and proven that their job can't be done with AI. Well, that's really hard when jobs got let go, things shifted in the organization. Nobody really had tested AI's capabilities. So now they're trying to prove that it can't be done with AI, but the person's already gone. They're trying to backfill it, or they are trying to justify a new position. Well, can you prove AI can't do it? Not really. It's never been done before. And we haven't really thought about it in terms of how AI would work. So this automation and unemployment connection in knowledge work, I very much feel like we're in the industrial revolution for knowledge work right now. I mean, it's left and right. The unfortunate part is, and it was messy in industrial revolution. I've been doing quite a bit of research on how that all played out. You know, a little bit of a sidebar, but it was like, oh, we're going to make work so safe and easy, kids could do it. And then kids started dying and it was not good. So I think we're seeing, that's an extreme example, but I think we're seeing some of that with knowledge work right now. It's like AI is totally capable. We can reduce headcount by 10, 20, 30% as AI fills that capability. How do we know that? Well, we don't, but we believe it can because we've heard AI is really smart and people can just tell it to do things and it will. And so decisions are being made on those assumptions only to have it blow back. And it turns out, oh, it wasn't quite what we thought. Oh, turns out there was more to the work that person did than an agent could even really handle. Or, oh, we didn't even know what they did. Apparently AI doesn't just know how to pick up pieces, type of a thing. So this is one I'm going to be watching through the end of the year. I don't have good predictions for 2025 when it comes to unemployment. I really don't. If anything, the trajectory we're on right now, I see more and more companies making bad bets on what automation is going to be able to do for them, not making wise, thoughtful, discerning things on that, which again, I understand why it happens. I don't agree with why. And so this is where, if you are somebody who's going through this, trying to think this through, please think carefully. And if you need help, reach out to me or someone before you just decide to cut XYZ headcount or slash, your resources by this much in hopes of what AI is going to give you. I'm telling you right now, while adoption is broad, successful utilization is not. And that's another reason why I know I mentioned this, and I'll continue to mention it, not just because I'm trying to convince you to use the stuff I do, but because I really believe it helps. That's why I created the AI effectiveness rating. Was we're asking people to use AI and we have no idea how capable and ready they are to do it effectively. We really don't. We're like, well, they have the tools, so they should be fine. That is a terrible strategy. And so we're going to see this continue to compound. And I have major concerns about prediction number 5 of the automation unemployment that we're going to see as we go through the rest of this year. Now, might we hit a tipping point? Might something blow up that forces this to flip back? Maybe, but right now the pendulum is swinging hard towards automation of knowledge work, and the pendulum always comes back. I just really hope we don't have to let the pendulum swing all the way and bust through I don't know how many walls, because people are getting hurt in this one. So please, if you're thinking about downsizing, or even if I think it's totally fine if you're considering new roles, if you're considering backfilling, to say, hey, can we at least justify that this is the kind of work, and pressure test, but don't just make blind statements like, until we've proven AI can't do it, we're not going to backfill. Don't do that kind of stuff, because it's really putting way too much pressure on the people who are left to keep everything going, because nobody goes, well, that person's gone. We're trying to prove if AI can do it. So for now, we'll just kind of hang in there. It's really crushing people. So please be really careful with this one. All right. Now, this one I thought was interesting. So the polarization of return to office. This one has died down in some regards. I'm not seeing nearly as much of the, demand that everybody come back into the office. That seemed to have been a kind of Q1, early Q2 boom where every company seemed to be shouting this. I would say a lot of companies are now settling into the hybrid thing. However, here's one of the biggest concerns that I'm seeing. And this one was just sparked this week. I'll talk about it next week probably. But Amazon, and this is a concern that I'm seeing happen to me, which is even worse than the return to office polarization. So Amazon's taking this to a new level in that they're forcing relocation for people to have to be in one of the major corporate hubs. You can't just be near an Amazon location. You got to be at a corporate hub if you're a corporate worker. And there's this just shift towards seeing employees as nothing more than a means to an end. And I think that's really what's fueling this polarization around return to office. It's not really about return to office. In some situations it is. Sometimes there really truly are people who are, firmly set in that the office actually produces better results. What I'm seeing that's interesting is I think there is a general acceptance now that the office may not be as much of a factor in terms of performance as we thought. The data supported that from the beginning. So I think people are just becoming a little more self-aware that this really is more my preference, my comfort, what I would like. And so people are more like, I either want it or I don't. And it's not based on performance. It's based on, what we want, which companies are allowed to do that. I get that. But what's concerning is because we can't stand on the returning to office is better for performance. I think that's lost some of its steam. People just acknowledge that's not true. Everybody knows that's not true. Let's not say that. There's almost becoming the true colors of organizations are coming out. And we're starting to see more like this, to me, this Amazon thing, which is we're going to say it's about you need to work at the corporate hub, but we're not even really hiding the fact that this just has to do with we just need to get rid of people. And so we're going to pick the ones who are more in compliance with what we want, but we're going to do it in a way that makes it seem like we're, giving you a choice. We're not really, but we are. I mean, you could move on your own dime and move across the country, completely disrupt your family. I mean, hey, we're giving you a chance, but really we know you're probably going to quit. And almost this cold disregard for the value of employees. Now, I really want to watch where this one goes. I hope we can mitigate this and things start to shift. Now, to be clear, this isn't every company. So if you're listening to this and you're getting a little irritable because you're like, that's not how we are. I'm not saying every company's like this, but there is this growing divide in kind of the senior leadership, the boards, the people at the top, and how much value they're placing on the people who are doing the actual work. And this is why I'm also seeing so much of this unemployment, to the previous point, unemployment and automation. You've got decision makers that don't really know the work, that are just kind of callously going, yeah, I'm sure AI can do it. Get rid of 20% of people and we'll be fine. Because there's just a perception that AI will take care of it for us. We don't really need to worry about it. And I think that's really, really unfortunate. So I think what 6 is pushing on this polarization of return to offices, I think we're going to start to see a rise of the wheat's going to separate from the chaff in terms of which companies actually care about their employees and which ones truly don't at all. And I don't know where we're going to sit at the end of this year or moving forward in terms of what is the split? Are more and more companies going to adopt this? Who cares about employees? We don't really need them anyway. AI will take care of it. Or are things going to start to go south and things are going to swing back to the employees have a little more of a say, have a little more strength? Because this is a swing we saw in the pandemic. Tons of swing went to the employees. The employees could kind of command what they wanted and companies just had to kind of bow down to it. I personally, even though I thought it was great how employee-centric, I wouldn't say it was employee-centric, it came out of need. I thought it was good that we saw employees had more autonomy, more power and authority over things. It went too far. It went way too far. I was part of way too many company meetings where I'm like, people are asking for how much for this job that requires this, and companies just really didn't have a choice because they couldn't find anybody. And so it was just like, well, I mean, we got to pay it. And it was like, you're paying 6 figures for a job that you would have paid a fraction of that for, before. And you're like, well, yeah, that's kind of where we're at. So it's swung back hard. The question is going to be, by the time we get to the end of the year, what's going to happen? Are we going to end up somewhere in the middle? Are we still going to be swinging harder to the, hey, companies are the ones calling all the shots, and that's really all that matters? I don't know at this point, but there definitely is less, I would say, of the polarization to return to office. That seems to be more in steady state. People kind of have made their decisions about this. I think it's really now boiling down to, it's shifted from, do you care about and value your employees, or do you not? It's less about where people are working and more of a public decision on how much do we really value employees and their contributions, and how much do we really think you're just a means to an end. All right. So number 7 for the beginning of the year, I talked about kind of reimagining employability, employment skills. I still firmly believe that there is so much potential for us to completely re-architect what work looks like. And what does it mean to be if you say, this is my job title, I think there's so much room for us to go, but that means something completely different than it did in 2024. I am not seeing this move in the direction that I think it should, or it's not moving as fast as I could. I think there's a lot of talk about, we could have people spending more time on higher order things. We could completely reimagine these job roles. There's a lot of what I would describe as like vision casting. People are getting in rooms and reimagining. They have a great breakout and, whatever. They dream up all these different things they could do with work. And then the week-long strategy session ends and people feel really motivated and excited about what AI could do. And then they go back to work and they just kind of return to what they've always been doing. I think that's really, really unfortunate. Now, all that said, I understand why, in that it's a lot of work and it seems like it's a lot to take on. Again, subtle plug. This is why I created the AER. I think one of the problems is we are handing the keys over to people and just saying, go and use AI to reimagine work. But they don't really understand how to use AI or what they're good at or what they're not. They don't really have a plan for their own development to know, hey, how do I decide if I should be using AI for this or not use AI for this? And that people are stuck. And so then you run into this thing of people are waiting for corporate to define it for them. Well, I can tell you right now, if you're waiting for corporate to define what your new job looks like, one, either they're not going to do it, or they're going to do it, going back to this automation unemployment, by making some rash decision of, we decided we don't need this job title anymore because AI can do it. Or somebody's going to come tell you, now your job is this. I actually talked to a software engineer recently where they just got the memo. You're no longer writing code. You're just looking at code that's generated by AI and approving it. And that literally is now his job. That's it. It was just given to him. And so I think this is a real risk for people who are not taking seriously, hey, I need to deconstruct my worth. I need to reimagine my job role. I need to position to my leaders what I should be doing and how my job works in AI. I need to be taking some ownership of this, not waiting for my company to do this, waiting for some sort of mandate or directive, because the directives that are coming are not great. So if you're feeling like, I see lots of talk about AI, I see lots of potential, but at the end of the day, I'm just going into work and getting my job done, and I'm using it kind of where it makes sense, you're missing an opportunity. And I can tell you just from conversations, this is going to come back to bite you. So is it happening? Actually, no. I would say I predicted that this was going to be something that I really thought I was going to see more of in 2025. The adoption curve in this area is moving way slower than it should. And it's really only happening when things hit the fan, when somebody gets the email that we're an AI first company now, or when a functional VP gets a notice that they need to reduce spend, operational spend, i.e. headcount, by 25%. And they're just tasking all their people to do it. And everybody's running around scrambling and going, okay, what can we do? What can AI do? Who do we not need? And it's a mess. And so if you don't want to be in that hair on fire mess, I would strongly encourage you to get ahead of it, to actually start moving beyond just vision casting and get to something more pragmatic and tangible. And again, I can help. I've got the tools to, I know the people. If it's not me, I can connect you with folks. So, all right. So this next one, exponential complexity, number 8 for me at the beginning of the year was exponential complexity in cybersecurity. I would agree this is becoming a major problem. I talked to lots of CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers, for those less familiar with the term, who are doing a lot more, having to navigate a lot more. I would say a lot of this complexity is being managed behind the scenes. So while I put this forth to the broader audience to say, hey, this is something everybody needs to be kind of aware of and things like that, I'm not really seeing that. I'm seeing a lot of kind of the security experts taking care of a lot of this, which I think is a good thing, actually. I think the CISOs of the world, the organizations are taking security more seriously. And so they're embedding and doing more stuff to help mitigate some of the complexity that would otherwise be hitting. But we are seeing more personalized phishing attacks. We're seeing, the number of text messages I get from, somebody trying to get information from me. I mean, it's happening. I don't think we're necessarily feeling the complexity on the end user side as much as we will. It didn't go quite as far as I thought it would, which in some ways is good. I think the gap that still needs to be addressed with this, though, is I think people still grossly misunderstand AI and what it can do. And so, we are adapting, like I said, going back to my earlier point of the deepfake stuff. I think people are more skeptical. They're a little more, this feels off. I don't know what this is, but it feels off, which is good. But it also means things are slowing down. People are more resistant to change. They're, more skeptical, and trust is a lot lower than it's ever been. And I think that's not a great thing. Okay. This one was a stretch, and I knew it was a stretch when I predicted it. Well, part of it's a stretch, part of it's not. So number 9 at the beginning of the year, I said there's going to be this rise in this demand for data privacy, personal data privacy, and even it might go so far as to stretch into people finding ways to monetize the value of their data. I am not seeing the monetization piece pick up at all like I thought it might. I thought there might be some startups that, are going to promise they're going to do all the data protection for you, and then they're going to monetize it for you. So they were going to, clean all those sources out there. And then, you could potentially sign up and choose who you want your data going to and get compensated for it. I think some of the problems with that came to be these companies who thought they might be able to do it realized it's like impossible to try and fence in people's data. It's just literally so everywhere that they're worried about the risk of, well, if we tell you your data is not going to go anywhere, 1, we can't really protect it. And 2, we don't really have a product that any companies are interested in, because they'd be like, so why would we pay people for their data when we can readily and freely scrape it off the internet? And those organizations are going, I don't know. I don't really have a good answer for that. So when it comes to the personal data privacy, right now I did a post on it the other day where I told people, I said, just so you know, nothing you do on or near an internet connected device is private. And you may think, oh, well, I'm running it through a VPN. I'm using incognito mode. I'm doing all these different things. I have a service through my bank, or I signed up for a service that goes out and takes all my personal data off websites. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, those are all good things, or can be, but they're actually just redistributing the risk. So as an example of this, if you have a VPN, I think in many ways VPNs make you more vulnerable if you're not careful, because now you're literally channeling everything you do through a third party who now has access to all of that. So I wouldn't be surprised if VPN companies end up being the ones who go, yeah, we'll keep your data safe and you're going to pay us for it now, which you kind of are for a VPN. but maybe they'll monetize it back to you, but they might not, because they might go, almost like the mafia, where it's like, yeah, we're keeping you safe, and in return, you're going to pay us this much, and it can be used to exploit people, type of a thing. I still think people just don't. They think, well, my phone number, my social security number, my name and address isn't on the internet, so I'm safe. And it's like, no, you're not. AI can detect so many different patterns and take completely abstract data points and lock into exactly who you are. It doesn't need your name, address, and social security number to know who you are, and know, well, based on IP address, based on time of day, based on these, what to us would seem like random factors, it would be like, that's Christopher Lind, and here's all the things he likes to do and is interested in, and when he does all those things and all this other stuff. Like, I think that's what's missing. And I don't really have a good solution for that, to be completely honest with you. The best solutions that I have for people is, one, I guess you can go completely off grid. You can go completely off grid and go, I'm going to, move to the middle of nowhere, not have an internet connection, not have electricity, or maybe I'll just have a solar panel. That's one option, I suppose. But the other big one that I just tell people all the time is, and to me, this isn't about like, we don't need privacy, but I'm like, don't do things that you don't want people knowing about. And that's not me saying, oh, so we shouldn't have, Christopher, are you saying we shouldn't have data privacy? No, that's not what I'm saying. I hate the fact that AI can pretty much know everything you're doing based on the limited data that it can capture. I don't like that. I think it's terrible that these AI companies know more about you than probably your spouse does. But I don't have a solution to it other than, so know that that's the water you're swimming in, and just know that they know who you are, and don't do things. You can't hide anything. Stop trying to hide, because that's just going to add stress and anxiety and all this other stuff to it. So that's kind of where I am at that. But like I said, I'm not seeing anything in terms of helping protect people's data. I'm not seeing even people being able to get paid for their data. I actually almost would consider taking this off the list in terms of, I don't even know, maybe it'll hit a breaking point. We've had some big breaches this year, but I just don't know. It's so prevalent. It's like trying to separate salt from ocean water. You're like, I guess technically you could try and do it, but the tides are going to come in and ruin everything you tried to accomplish. I don't know. Then 10 was the growing need for purpose. This one, I would say, if anything, is only continuing to rise. To people out there who are still looking for their purpose in their work, in what they do, in how much money they make, in all these other things, people are getting crushed. The update I would give on this one is, people are still scrambling and trying to grasp onto things that can't sustain you in terms of purpose. Your job title is not going to give you purpose, because your job's going to, even if the title stays the same, what you do is going to change radically. The company you work at, that you've been there for 30 years, is going to go, thanks for your service. We're done. We decided we got an agent that can do it close enough to what you can do. We don't really know for sure, but that's what they told us. So thanks. And so I think people are very vulnerable to this right now. And so if anything, I would say, coming from my Christian worldview, my purpose is not in what I do, but who God made me to be. That's immune to some of this stuff. And I'm not saying everybody needs to adopt mine. It's a great one. I value it highly, but if you don't have purpose outside of some of the stuff you do, or these other factors that are just really up in the air right now, you are very, very vulnerable. And I'm seeing this just crush on people. The number of people I've talked to this year who their whole world has been turned upside down and they don't know up from down, it's bad, and it's only growing. So if you want to be less vulnerable, you might want to take some time and sit down and go, who am I, and what really is my purpose, and where does my value come from? Am I finding it from sources that are at a high risk of being torpedoed? If so, you are knowingly making yourself very, very vulnerable. and a lot of people are right now, and they're taking the heat. So I hope I have better news on that one in 2020. At the end of the year. Right now, this one's on a downward trend. It's a growing need. It's a growing need, so that's growing, but that's not a good thing. I mean, it is, but I guess what I'm saying is I'm still seeing people scramble from one really shaky ground to another. They're like, oh, my job's changing, so I'm not finding myself in that company. I'm going to go work at a different company, and it'll be all better over there. And I've seen people, they move to another company and their position gets eliminated like 3 weeks after they start, and it just rocks their world. So be really, really careful on that one. Okay. For the sake of time, I want to move quickly to some of the things I'd add, and then I'm not going to go quite in depth on all 5 of these, but I want to track on them so that I can see where we end up at the end of the year. One of the big ones that is blowing up all over is the militarization of AI. We have seen tons of defense contracts pop up. So this whole next section is kind of the things I'd add, the things that weren't on my top 10 list that I would say these are things we need to be watching and again, just aware of. And militarization of AI, this one is pressing in that I know not all of us may even have an opportunity, but when I look at the nature of global conflict happening right now and all the dollars being thrown at AI, and then combined with the fact we're making big bets, despite data telling us those are bad bets to make and these are high risks to take with AI, this is an area that we seem to really be willing to throw things at. And I think this has big implications on things. I watched a documentary with my kids last night of this one dude who back in the Cold War basically prevented World War III. It was a Russian guy who was overseeing, and there was a false flag on America shooting off a bunch of nukes. And despite everything saying, the machines were telling him, he literally wrote the programming. The machines were telling him, you need to fire back. They just launched a bunch of missiles at you. And he went, no, this doesn't add up. And he prevented World War III. And this is something I'm not trying to doomsday go, oh my gosh, AI is going to lead to World War III. I think we do need to really all start to push back. If you're into politics, then move with your votes. If you're into social media and advocacy, move with your voice. If you're in advisory things like I am, like this is where I'm doing it, is I'm trying to really push to go, hey, can we think this through? I get the military is no different than any other organization. It's going to need to look at AI and figure out how best to use it. But there are certain things that have high risks and high human costs that AI is not ideal for. And we need to be really careful. And right now, there seems to be a lot of reckless energy going into the militarization of AI. And that's not new, but it's something that is becoming more and more prevalent, and people are becoming more aware of it. And I think we need to be careful that we don't get sucked into the patriotic hype of, hey, anything to keep us safe, anything to, whatever, because it's very easy going back to, this fueling some of our deepest tendencies in a way that will not go well for us. So I think we need to really be watching that. And I'm watching that one closely. And again, I think we just need to do what we can within the sphere of influence. Obviously, sitting there and worrying about if AI is going to take over the nuclear football and we're just going to hand it. Well, if we do, you're not going to be able to do anything about it. But I think we all have spheres of influence, and we need to be aware and watching that and not get so sucked up in protecting our country or, helping save the world or whatever it is. I think sometimes patriotism can be used to justify some pretty horrific acts. And so this is one I think we really need to watch. The other one I'd add, AI dependency, but separate from kind of this mental health thing. One that I am seeing as more and more companies are throwing AI into the mix and not doing so strategically. They're just kind of allowing people to use AI. Now they're rolling out agents and they're saying, go ahead, create agents to do whatever work. But it's like a SharePoint site. People are spinning these things up, and then people are getting let go, and nobody knows who created their agent or what their agent was doing and all this other stuff. And things break and nobody knows how to fix them. And so dependency from a business standpoint, there's already in my mind the previous one of dependency from a mental health as an individual. I'm seeing real business risk as companies are becoming dependent on AI to automate its workflows. They're dependent on AI systems to take care of a lot of different things. They're dependent on people who are propping themselves up with AI that they don't realize are propped up with AI. Then they get rid of the people and don't realize, well, they were only functioning because they had the AI support. Once they go, not only did you lose the person, but you lost all the AI support they were leaning on. And we're seeing little micro explosions all over. And so again, pressing back on this need of, folks, your AI strategy cannot be to implement Copilot and Gemini and call it a day. It just can't. More and more work is now happening in silos and happening in a vacuum, and people aren't even aware of what's happening. So when they do these layoffs, they really, the consequences of it are being felt exponentially. So just again, put the time, put the intention, call me, call someone, be like, hey, help us think through how do we do this so we don't create a system. Because what I'm seeing is companies are building their own black boxes. They don't even realize it. They're handing over AI to their teams and going, here you go, do more with this. And so their teams are doing it, but because it's all being done independently, nobody has any insight into what's happening. And then things change, somebody quits, there's layoffs, and now it's not just a small thing that they didn't know what happened. It's massive. And this is a real problem. And AI is not always on. I remember just recently, I think it was Google's system went down and it just took out, countless things. So we just be really, really careful with this. AI dependency is not just going to become a personal problem. It's going to become an institutional liability. And organizations need to be thinking about this proactively. Another big one that I think we need to add that I think is a pressing issue is the environmental concerns related to AI use. And you might go, well, what am I supposed to do about that? Even simple things like make sure you're using the right models for the work you're doing, because certain models use more power, more energy, require more tokens to run. Use the right model for the right task. Even little simple things like that can reduce the footprint of this. We see people going, hey, this is great. We're going to put in a big AI data center. It's going to be good for the local economy. Not thinking, okay, right, but it's going to completely suck power out of the grid. And are we thinking through the implications of that? The water implications, because of how much water it takes to cool all these data centers. Are we planning for that? Have we considered this? Do we really need all this stuff? We just keep throwing more and more at AI, not thinking what are the consequences because it's digital and it feels so disconnected. We're already bad at thinking of the environmental concerns of things that we can touch and see. We're really bad at thinking of tangible environmental concerns with digital stuff. We just think it happens. We don't think about what it takes to put together these microprocessors, what it takes in terms of the real estate to house these data centers, the impact of those data centers on the energy grid, the power grid, the water supply, the local economy. Now you throw a bunch of into this, but is it pouring taxes back in? Well, not really, because a data center hardly requires any people to work there. So there's this promise of, it's going to create all this economic growth for our local community. And it's like, not really, because the 5 people that run the place aren't really here. And so the trade-off's not there. So this is something we all need to be paying attention to. If you're in a city where they're talking about putting in a data center, you should speak up. You should ask these questions. You should put this. If you're in a tech company considering this stuff, you should be asking critical questions about, hey, are we really doing this? If you're a business decision maker thinking of hooking up to an API with AI, you should be thinking about which model should we really be using. There are simple decisions that we can all make to help reduce the environmental impact of AI. And the environmental impact is real. And I think that's why I would increase this in terms of things we need to be watching for. Is we're already starting to see the impact of this, and we're just getting started. And this is like, for the most part, on nobody's radar. Like most people are like, yeah, I think I saw a thing once where like each time you use ChatGPT, it uses 2 bottles of water. Ha 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 ha. And it's like, No, not ha 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 ha. Like, we need to think about that. So every time you go make a cat meme, like, is that really what you need to be using this high-powered tech for? Because you doing that is only fueling the demand in the industry, which has this massive effect. And if we all were a little more thoughtful, we actually could make a difference in the potential environmental impact. And so again, I would bump this up to that. This is a pressing issue. We need to be thinking about this. Another one is the polarization of AI use. I talked about this a little bit throughout. Is we seem to be moving into this age where everybody thinks. So it seemed at the beginning of the year, it was people either just, they used AI or they didn't use AI. And it seems like it's almost compounding to the point where everybody now is moving to a point where we know AI use is in general an acceptable thing. There's some people who are anti-AI, but it's always hilarious because then when you talk to them, it's like, you actually use AI a ton. You just don't think you do. And so it's almost like there's this cognitive dissonance growing where everybody's using AI, but they think the way they're using it is the only right way to use it. And everybody who's not using it like them is bad. And they're the problem in society. Oh, these people, they use AI to create AI generated images. They're ruining creativity. And you're like, okay, we are already divided enough. We've got enough things to wage war against each other over. We don't need to be waging war over each other on how we're using AI. We just need to be really, really careful of this, because I am seeing this just get polarized. I see it in just about every industry. Every industry, it's like you're the AI people. Well, I'm not. You're that AI person. And it's really causing a lot of conflict. And we got to get a handle on this and unite around what we should all agree on, which is everybody using AI intentionally with discipline and being very surgical and thoughtful about how they're doing it. If we could all unite around that and then challenge each other on that. And yes, let's call out reckless use. Let's push people who are clearly using the AI recklessly. But let's not get hung up on, oh, you use AI to write? Oh, you're one of those people. What? Come on. Find out how they're using it to write. Is it augmenting? Is it enhancing what they're doing? Are they still in the driver's seat? Well, then who cares if they use it slightly differently than you do? You don't need to divide over that. And this, to me, is a major problem that we've got to fight against, because if we don't, we are already as divided as I've ever seen in my life. I feel like everybody's holding a gun at everybody, and we're all like pointing them at each other. It's like the Cold War on steroids. Everybody's got a gun pointed at everybody's head, just waiting for the right reason to pull the trigger. And this is just fueling that, because now there's all this uncertainty and fear around AI use and who's doing what. And so now it's like, are you one of those? Like, are you the one contributing to this problem? And it's a little concerning, a lot concerning. So please, regardless of your feelings on AI, let's focus on what we can agree on. And I don't think I talk to anybody who says, I'm a big fan of reckless AI use. I don't know anybody who does that. Everybody can pretty much rally around, yes, okay, maybe I'm a bit uncomfortable with it. Maybe that's not how I would do it. But so long as somebody's being thoughtful, intentional, mitigating strategies, keeping people at the center of this, I can get on board. I may be uncomfortable with it, but we need to focus more on that and less on the use case. If I see M dashes in your writing, I know you're one of those people. Like, oh, stop it. Stop it. We don't need more of that crap. So, and this is a major risk, because the more divided we are, the more problems we're going to have. All right. The last one in terms of pressing issues that I think just rocketed to the top for me based on some recent research coming out of Lego and some other things I've been involved with is we're not thinking enough about the impact on kids. 25% of kids are using generative AI products. They're using it on a regular basis. They are growing up in an environment where a lot is being dependent on AI. They're growing up with adults who are leaning on AI, who are in many cases checking out and just kind of going on cruise control, where they're growing up around an environment where they're constantly in fear of, is AI taking this from me? They're using tools that were not designed with them in mind. So the guardrails, the safety precautions, the protocols around it are not there. We are shaping and molding a generation right now. And I know that as a dad of 8, this probably weighs on me more than it does for some of you who watch and listen. But even if you don't have kids, you're going to get older, and the support you're going to need from the younger generation is going to be built on these kids right now. And so if we aren't really thoughtful about how we're shaping and influencing and molding the decisions we make, and then also how we're letting them engage and we're helping guide and coach and shape them, this is going to also blow back up in our face. So this one, to me, we got to raise this. We got to do more to think about how kids are using AI, where they're using it. And it's not about banning it. It's not about going, no AI for kids. Like, well, you're not going to do that. Believe me, as a kid of the 90s, I was part of plenty of households and friends and all this of parents who, we're not going to have the internet in this house. Like, oh, okay. It's a terrible strategy. It's not going to work. So we can't take that approach, but we do need to be more intentional about it. Very quickly, I know I'm a little long here, but the other things I think we need to watch. These are early indicators. I'm actually curious to see where these are at the end of the year. The human AI effectiveness capability, like how good are we at using this? As we're moving, and I actually kind of said this before, I actually would move this up, but I think we're still a little early in terms of we don't have a lot of visibility into how good people are at using AI. We know they're doing it, but we don't really have any visibility into this. This is why I'm pushing the AI effectiveness rating. I feel like I'm early in the curve. I still have a lot of people that go, yeah, that'd be kind of helpful, but they aren't quite seeing like, no. You need to know this so you know where to grow, where to focus, what to do. And so it's early, but I don't think it's so early that it's like, yeah, we'll get to that next year. I think this is something that needs to move up, but I think we're still early in it. The other one is robotics. At the beginning of this year and even early this year, there's been, and there still is, there's lots of noise about humanoid robots. You're going to have humanoid robots walking around, vacuuming your house, doing all this other stuff. There's still been some major advancements in it. It's not moving quite as fast as some of the analysts and some of the news would make you think. So I'm still very much watching where humanoid robotics are going, but I'm not seeing this necessarily trend. It feels a little bit like the VR thing, where like lots of potential there, but it's slower to adopt. It's not moving quite as fast. The hardware is not quite where it needs to be. It's not quite as accessible. People are a little more disconnected from it. So again, I'll be interested to see where we are at the end of the year. If that suddenly takes off, the capability has moved, exponentially, but in terms of adoption, we're still early stages. But I do think it's worth keeping a note on. And then the last one, and then I'll wrap it up, is wearable AI. This is one that I kind of had in the back of my mind at the beginning of the year, but this whole thing with Johnny Ive and OpenAI, and now I'm starting to see, I kind of thought the wearable AI stuff was going to fizzle a bit. It was going to be more of the integration. The reason I say it's still early is people are very skeptical of AI. The idea of an always-on AI thing is very uncomfortable. There have been some major failures with this. So I don't necessarily think this is a, hey, you got to be keeping a close eye on this. But it's something I'm watching because it has a lot of potential in terms of where it could go. So more to come on that. No real major devices coming out other than really the big one was OpenAI and Johnny Ive, and what might that mean? So we'll see where that one goes. But I know this was a longer one, but I wanted to make sure I did a rundown, kind of did the update as we come into the middle of the year. And I will do this again at the end of the year, and we'll see how things go. So with that, I hope you have a great week and a great weekend, and I won't be here next week. So enjoy your holiday. If you're in the U.S., enjoy the 4th of July. If you're not in the U.S., enjoy the break while all the U.S. people are on break. So with that, have a great weekend. We'll see you on the other side.